Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Grumpy Snail Podcast, where the news is made up, in my opinion, does not matter. I am your host, Jonathan Snyder, and thank you for joining me as I try to squeeze 2 minutes of information into a 15-minute video. If you like these videos, make sure you click that like button, make sure you share these videos, and also subscribe to my channel here. I upload a video every Sunday at noon, and possibly you may see a short every now and then. My last one got 500 something views. That was pretty cool. They really like to push those shorts, even though you can't really put a lot of information in them. I guess, it's that whole TikTok thing. Anyway, I do have a merch store, and so if you're interested in that, the description can be found in the description box down below, and any comments or questions can also be put in the comment section. Thank God, I got that over with. I tried to think long and hard about how to approach the topic for today, and I see really no great way to do that. This stretches back to the beginning of the podcast when I started talking about all the books that I read. And, after last week's podcast, you may be confused and wondering why. Why are things so screwed up? Or why do they feel screwed up? Maybe if you're older, you're wondering why the world feels so differently now compared to the way that it used to. I mean, we just went through a whole month of groups of people walking down the street chanting, "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children." So, it's at this point that I want to kind of veer off in a slightly different direction and speak to a more overarching issue that we face today. So what I'm going to do is use this podcast specifically, we're at 51, as an intro into the next several podcasts in which we're going to be discussing the Great Reset. Now, I know that just saying that phrase will make people not watch the video starting off. I mean, it's in the title, the thumbnail. At this point, the phrase has gone around for so long enough that the casual internet user already has conspiracy theory red flags going off. I know for a fact that just mentioning that phrase will cause the algorithm to push the video down, in views and, maybe proving my whole point in the process. But before clicking away, thinking this is all on the level of some tinfoil flat earth Pizzagate nonsense, I want you to think about this quote from Thomas Jefferson. "Question with boldness even the existence of God, because if there be one, he must more approve the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear." The Great Reset, my friends, is not a work of fiction. It is a highly influential movement among the world's elite to reset the global economy using banks, government programs, environmental, social, and governance metrics. As I go along in the coming weeks, I want you to think what is going on in the world around you. Think about the cultural struggles, the current wars, in the Ukraine, Middle East, the recent election issues, not just past, but the current ones coming, the political conflicts, racial divide, the collapsing economies, and of course the recent pandemic that we've went through. Because all of these things are relevant. I want to paint an Orwellian future for you. A future of what life looks like in a post-Great Reset world. The date is August 29th, 2040. The economy, once driven by the wants and needs of the individual consumer, is now guided by an agenda crafted by a cabal of international elites. Whew, man, that sounds really tinfoil hatty. Despite having been marketed as a solution to all of society's ills, the Great Reset agenda has left everyday Americans worse off than ever before and increasingly dependent on the government and wealthy global corporations that serve as foundation of this new world. After Congress passed a version of the Green New Deal, the legislation has wiped out more than 10 million jobs supported by oil and the gas industry, devastating economies of Colorado, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Texas, and other states that once benefited from the fracking and other forms of conventional energy development. Some are going to try to counter, an argument like this by saying that these jobs will be replaced with those that are mentioned in the recent passed CHIPS Act. But, as you'll read in the news, these companies that are benefiting from the CHIPS Act are attempting to bring in foreign workers as opposed to the American ones. So you got to watch out for stuff like that. The widespread construction that occurred under the reset's rapid transformation of America's energy sector has replaced some of the jobs lost in the oil and gas industry, of course, like we said. But millions of additional jobs, many of which were once located in America's heartland, have been shipped overseas, as manufacturers and other energy-intensive industries have fled in droves to nations with lower prices for electricity and other forms of energy. As a result, hundreds of cities and towns across the United States have become economically depressed. In this post-Great Reset dystopia that I'm laying out before you, 1 billion solar panels and more than 1 million wind turbines have been constructed all across the United States, destroying tons of millions of acres of land. Hundreds of thousands of additional acres have been decimated by the thousands of miles of the new power lines and extensive mining operations needed to obtain the natural resources used to build America's expansive wind and solar facilities. Millions of birds and bats, including endangered species, are killed every year by these massive spinning blades of America's vast wind farms. Millions of other animals have been displaced following the collapse of countless ecosystems resulting from the destruction caused by developers building new renewable energy facilities. Energy prices have more than tripled in many parts of the country. In places with less sunshine and wind, energy prices are 5 times higher. And blackouts are common, especially in regions with frigid winters. Restaurants and food vendors and grocery stores limit meat sales to help battle climate change. High fat and sugary foods are restricted or banned outright as well. Gasoline-powered cars have been outlawed or rendered useless by the elimination of fossil fuels. Air travel has decreased dramatically as prices have increased because of harsh regulations, on the carbon dioxide emissions. Americans have been promised a new national network of high-speed rail, but more than 10 years into its construction, little progress has been made, as environmentalists, concerned communities, and politicians continue to fight over the location of the rail lines. Taxes on businesses have doubled, and a slew of new sales, wealth, and real estate levies have been created in an attempt to create greater economic equity. A big word in the Great Reset, equity. America's wealthiest business owners and innovators have left the country and moved to competitor nations that refuse to go along with the Great Reset. We'll talk about this later. Flooding those nations with hundreds of billions of dollars in new wealth. The groups of Americans hit hardest by the economic exodus are, of course, lower income and working class families. Nearly 3/4 of Americans now depend on the federal government for many basic goods and services. Tens of millions of working-age adults refuse to find a job and instead live off the government's basic income system. Millions of others are employed by federal or state government agencies through the national government's Job Guarantee Program. The federal government routinely runs deficits of, $10 trillion or more. The national debt has surpassed $100 trillion, of course, and the international unease about the strength of the U.S. dollar galvanized the world's largest economies to develop a new currency for international transaction, causing investors and foreign banks to flood American markets with their cash instead. Historically high levels of inflation in key industries followed, pushing the United States into a second Great Depression. The national GDP has been sluggish at best for more than a decade at this point. A new federal agency, the U.S. Department of Environmental, Social, and Governance Compliance, has been created to develop and maintain an ever-shifting series of standards that determine which American businesses are permitted to trade in the country's largest stock exchanges, as well as who can receive the hundreds of billions of dollars pumped into the corporations every year by government officials, desperate to keep more companies from heading overseas. Many businesses spend hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars every year attempting to meet these ESG standards, and every corporation is required to have an ESG officer on its board of directors, matching standards that have already been in place for decades in China. In line with the ESG standards, businesses shift their product development toward causes endorsed by and favoring elites in government and businesses. Every American corporation is forced to report the racial and gender demographics of its staff and management and to justify every hiring decision made over the past year. Gun and ammunition manufacturers and sellers are effectively forced to close their doors due to overwhelming regulatory compliance costs. Just saying the word gun is completely knocking this video down so nobody will see it. Individual investors, large and small, are given specialized ratings for their investments. Investors who attempt to earn money in those businesses that have the ruling class considers to be undesirable for society, like candy stores, vape shops, ranches, those things are punished with financial penalties. Newly structured ESG compliant corporations wield more influence over society more than ever. Private ownership of most products are a thing of the past. Housing, automobiles, and many other key goods are now available only as services offered by corporations. Most consumers rent products instead of buying, not because they want to, but because they can't afford to own property anymore. Everyday Americans' credit scores are no longer based on, the traditional financial metrics, which in my opinion are a little kind of wonky to start with. But instead, financial institutions use consumer browser history, social media activity, and other previously private user information from tech devices to craft credit scores for the American still wealthy enough to own high-priced property. Individuals and businesses, owners with a history of browsing dangerous websites that dare to challenge the government's official narrative or of searching for concerning topics online are deemed too untrustworthy for many lenders and credit service companies. A national free college tuition plan is put directly or indirectly, been put in place. The federal government, in charge of virtually every higher education institution in America. Most private colleges, including the vast majority of religious schools, have shut their doors forever or have agreed to become a more secular public institution in order to take part in the free tuition plan, which is available only to students attending government-run colleges. Nearly all K-12 school choice programs in the U.S. Have been defunded, pushing thousands of parents to send their children back to the local government-run school district, no matter how dangerous or dysfunctional it is, or how terrible the education there is. Parents have virtually no control at all over the curriculum standards. Children spend less time learning about math and science, and much more time learning about critical race theory and other social justice topics, causing them to fall further behind their peers in the other developing nations. Using these ESG standards, social media companies like Facebook and Twitter and search engines such as Google have expanded their content restrictions, banning from their platforms many types of speech, including political and religious speech, which have been labeled offensive, misleading, or misinformation. China, India, and Russia have refused to comply with the Great Reset reforms. This has allowed these countries to keep their energy costs down, which in turn provides them with substantial leverage in trade agreements. China and India are now the world's most influential and powerful nations. They use their vast wealth to continue buying large amounts of land and natural resources from developing nations in Asia and Africa, and maybe the US, setting the stage for their global dominance over the next 100 years. Sounds great, doesn't it? In the upcoming podcast, we're going to discuss how we get to this place, why this is happening, and who is behind this transformation. Like I said, it's not a conspiracy theory, and I'm going to prove it. But as for now, your 15 minutes are up, but the grumpy ramblings will continue, so make sure that you tune in next week for another video. Thank you for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. If you like this video, make sure you click the like button, share the video, and subscribe to this channel. Tune in next Sunday at noon for another video. It's going to be another podcast. We're going to move on with this subject in depth. We're going to start talking about it, even if they want to push it down. They want me to stop there and have to kick me off YouTube. Just check out Rumble. Also, check out my merch store. All right? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Good night. God bless. And Godspeed.